Uh-oh, the Bears have some holes in their 2025 recruiting class. Here's what they need to do to fill those up on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas, as well as the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We are talking recruiting. The official visit season is closed. We haven't gotten all the commitments from Baylor, but no more OVs this summer. And this is the end of a sprint. We need to check where Baylor is at. So the only person who is the definitive authority on where Baylor is at when it comes to recruiting, well, I guess Dave Aranda 1, Will Turboff of Bears Illustrated 2, great friend of the show, and he does an awesome job covering this team. I spoke to Will to get the temperature on this 2025 recruiting class. So without any further ado, there we go. Oof, that's bad. Past Cam and Will Turboff. I promised it. I have now delivered it. We are joined by the great Will Turboff of Bears Illustrated 247 Sports, the guy on Baylor football recruiting. Don't just ask me because I go to him for a lot of information, but there are people a lot higher up than me that go to Will Turboff for some information. Will, welcome back to the show. This has got to be quite a busy time of year for you.
Yeah, like you said off the air, it's like tax season for an accountant.
Yeah.
Early days, and you get to hear a lot of different people talking about Baylor recruiting and just all across the country where our targets and prospects are looking at. So it's a fun time to follow for sure.
Yeah. And we know, college football coaching and some of the other sports are catching up to this in terms of it's a 12-month job, right? You're done with football season, and then 2 months later, you're back out on the field and you've got spring practice and spring game. And then you're doing camps and you're reaching out to some of the underclassmen in high school. And then there's this 3 weeks in June and into early July, I guess, for some teams, official visit season. I have tried to convey this across on the pod, but you are in the mud of this thing, so you know it better than I do. What are these 3 weeks like for a college football program in terms of just the importance and having all hands on deck?
I mean, it's just one of the very many parts of the college football schedule that put teams in this really weird point. They're bringing the guys, the biggest prospects they have, all these guys that have committable offers at the time, and at the same time, they're hosting these camps. So like you see, a Kamori and Morgan, a top 100 guy on campus at Baylor, and at the same time, Keith Rectorfield and all these guys are doing camps outside. So it's definitely a hectic time, and they've got to manage. We need to look at these next class of players, the guys in 2026, 27, 28 that are at these camps. But we need to culminate the months and years of interest that we've had and a lot of these guys that are on official visits and get both things done at the same time. So it's exciting, but I would not want to be in a staffer's shoes right now.
The war room just has to be insane right now. But looking at these official visits now, it's obviously very distinctly different from unofficial visits, including things like, hey, anyone who you see like taking the pictures with the gear on and the coaches and stuff, that's an official visit. Now, what does that mean in a recruiting cycle, an official visit? How close are these kids to your program when they're coming on an OV?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Definitely with a school like Baylor, you're seeing a lot of, high-profile in-state guys giving them one last look. Generally, and they haven't been doing, admittedly, as great of a job in the last 2 or 3 cycles, especially with these younger kids now. But generally, Baylor is one of the first schools that offers these guys that turn out to be top 100 players. They turn out to be, top 10 in the state of Texas. And that's why you see a guy like Kamori and Morgan come back around to Baylor, give him one more shot, even if he doesn't make it in January or in March and all the other times they offer him to spend their weekend give Baylor a good shot. And it seems like they've got a great shot with him. And you look at another guy like Tanu Hines, who was going to go to Texas a couple of weeks ago. Ended up going to Texas a couple of weeks ago, had to cancel a trip to Baylor. And because Baylor's been around so long, because they're familiar with the high school coaches in the state and all the trainers, they get these chances with blue chip guys, maybe in some times when they don't really deserve it in some people's eyes, when they're going over schools like Arkansas and SEC programs that have much more prominence and probably much more endorsement and NIL opportunities. But Baylor has established a brand, and that's what they've been trying to push this summer, is that, when you win 3 games, and we've talked about this, a lot of times over the last few months, you can't come in and be the cocky guys. And you can't say, look at what we're doing. Look what we did the last 2 years. You have to say, we have this established brand. We have this established culture. We're not going to change the way that we operate. We may change the way we coach. We may change the way we play on the field. But we're still going to be Baylor. And that's done them very well so far this summer.
Yeah. And you kind of led off with a point that I'm always very, very interested in. And I mean, you said it, Baylor is historically good at getting in the door early, and it can always lead to mixed results, right? But you are hearing from these kids and what they're looking for in a program. How much does that mean to them that, these guys, they're down the road, which helps, but they also, they kind of contacted me before everyone else did. Because I think a lot of people, especially Baylor fans who are cynical about recruiting and football recruiting in particular, they say, well, this kid gets offered by Baylor, but then the next year it's Alabama that's offering him, and you're out the door. But it sounds like that early connection actually does help Baylor some of the time.
Yeah, there's a really good example of a player that just committed, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But another one is Jalen Cooper. He's a composite 4-star wide receiver. Baylor was the first team to offer him at a camp in June of 22. Turned out to get offers from A&M, basically every school in the Big 12. I mean, he's got over 20 offers now, and Baylor wasn't around that much for him for a significant period of time. But going into his junior year, they kept inviting him back out. They kept making sure that, he knew that he was appreciated. And that's why you're seeing Baylor and A&M and these big schools being in recruiting battles when, a 3-win team who doesn't have, and it seems like I'm being pessimistic about it, but in reality, it's a good thing. It's that, Baylor can go out there and win 3 games and they have a staff that can convince guys that have opportunities to play at schools where they, A, might be guaranteed to play on a winning team, or B, might be guaranteed to play early in their careers. And while they may not be able to do that, Baylor, they're still in these, recruiting battles. So it's pretty incredible. And that's, that's a key part of, if Baylor hopes to raise where they're at and, in recruitment, getting in early has really worked out for them. I mean, historically. And that's why you see a guy like Jalen Cooper come back around and Baylor still have a shot with him.
Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you guys know I love sports. I love them so much. I don't want them to stop. But in terms of the competitive playoff sports we've had the last 2 months, they're over. It's done. So I need to go to FanDuel to make everything feel like a playoff game yet again. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Yeah. So that's a message to Baylor fans, myself included, by the way, of, hey, let's not be too cynical. Right ahead it, okay? Let's let this play out a little bit. One guy I did want to ask you about, you just did an excellent story on him a few days ago for Bears Illustrated, and that is Leo Almanza Jr., the cornerback up from Byron Nelson High School in Trophy Club, Texas. Before we get into some of the beef of the article in here, which is something I led off the show with yesterday, just tell me about Leo, the player. I know for a lot of 3 stars, especially on the defensive side of the ball, there usually just isn't the same kind of explosive highlight tape as you might see a 4-star wide receiver, and people don't know as much as they do about the latter. So thinking about a 3-star guy like Leo Almanza, who is a great utility player up there at Nelson and has a lot of speed, what kind of profile does he fill out now looking at cornerback in 2 years?
Yeah, I really like this take by Baylor. And Leo kind of continues the trend of players that are now committed to Baylor that don't maybe have the stat sheet or the crazy highlight tape that you want to see. They're taking these guys more as prospects. They're taking them as, they figure with this 24 class that we have, with the guys that we're planning on adding in the portal a few months from now, but from the guys that we got a few months ago, we can afford to take some guys that might take a year or two to develop. And Leo, he's got the skill set for sure. I mean, he played wide receiver. There were a lot of people who thought, he got offers at wide receiver. Northwestern, off the top of my head, I think Houston was at one point offered him as a wide receiver. They're taking these super versatile guys. And he's another one where I think, once you give him a year or two to kind of fit into not only what Baylor doing but physically what he'll be able to do with maybe, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, that's a guy where I think you can pop him in year two, halfway through year two, make him a starter. And it's one that I, like I said, I really like. It's surprising, that Baylor was able to get him over Utah when Utah's done so well, especially with defensive backs from Texas.
Yeah.
Get him over Houston and get him over Kansas State. And looking at the team success thing, Baylor was at the bottom of the Big 12 last year. And to beat out all these Big 12 teams for a guy that could have gone to any of those schools. And this is not one where, some of those schools dropped off on him and those offers weren't committable. This is until the last day. Those other schools were reaching out. So this is one, I was very encouraged, and I think a lot of people should be, that they were able to land Leo.
And that's a start, right? We talked about this a few months ago I know there's no wins or losses or bonuses or banners that come with, hey, we won a recruiting battle. But to put it in the context, it is nice to see Baylor winning a guy, so to speak, over Utah and Kansas State, 2 teams that are picked to win the conference this year. Speaking of that, those are the teams that are picked to win the conference this year. Leo Almanza Jr. is putting some futures out there saying that they are going to bring the Big 12 championship back to Baylor. He said that in a story that you wrote. Tell me, is Leo the brash type?
He's not. He's actually a very
Really?
reserved guy. And, usually I ask when we do these commitment interviews, I say, if you had one message to Baylor fans, what would it be? And, he kind of cut me off in the middle of it. He said, we're going to win a Big 12 championship. That is the mindset right now. I mean, I've heard that from a lot of other guys, and obviously some of this stuff goes unreported. But that is the message that the staff is bringing right now. We're not coming to be mediocre. We're not coming to take one step up. By the time you're here, we want to be in Big 12 championship contention. So I think you're seeing, especially with Baylor right now, where you have guys in this class that are trying to convince some of the best players in the state of Texas to join. And you can't say, yeah, we're going to be good. You have to say, yeah, we're going to win the Big 12 championship, and we might go out and contend for national championships. So you got to aim high. You got to aim high.
Hey, I prefer that versus aiming low. Let's say that. And also, a point you just brought up and was also in the story is Baylor seems to have a good recruiter out there on the trail who is still playing football for the Coppell Cowboys. Now, we know that every team has got someone like that who is trying to get the recruiting going. But we've seen it a few times in this cycle. Demetrius Brisbane won from Tyler Chapel Hill, and Edward Griffin as well from Coppell. Is that what you're hearing rattling around this group of prospective Bears, that there's a couple guys doing some heavy lifting to get them on board?
Oh, absolutely. And, when Adam Schobel decommitted in April, they knew they needed a guy because very quickly after that, a few other offensive linemen decommitted. The class kind of came apart, and they knew that they needed, either a quarterback or a big name guy to kind of bring some some energy, some positive energy. And for a guy that's, so committed to Baylor and not talking to any other schools. And Edward is one of those guys. Ashton Jones is another one of those guys. Those two together, and being there the last 2 weekends during the official visits has been a huge benefit for Baylor, where they've got a solid class right now, but they've also got most of those guys that aren't worried about any other schools. And that's very rare to see, especially with a team, that isn't a name brand. Baylor's done out of anything in this cycle, they've gotten guys that are very strongly committed to the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And a point you brought up in there, which is something that you had about Keelan Russell a few weeks ago with SMU, is, obviously you got to build out a team in these recruiting cycles. It's not just the quarterback. And in fact, quarterback out of high school is as weird as it's ever been because of how many teams are just looking at the portal for QBs in major college football. But you had said it about SMU. Keelan Russell, the 4-star, decommits, flips to Alabama. He was their main recruiter. And now you say it about Edward Griffin too, a guy who can bring guys on board. So in any given recruiting class, is that still a key part to have a high-level quarterback that guys can rally around, even in today's landscape?
Absolutely. I mean, just from a personality standpoint, your quarterback is generally going to be the most eccentric guy. He's going to be, he's going to be the motivator. That's what he does. And for example, I covered, Nebraska for 24/7 Sports, and seeing Dylan Raiola do that for their class and do it for the class that they have now. So being able to get a quarterback like Edward, and Adam had done the same thing for so many months. And at one point it just, didn't end up working out. The staff changed and he couldn't really do it anymore. But getting an in-state guy who knows his way around the guys that are considering Baylor, he knows the state of recruiting in Texas, it really helps. And I think Edward has done a great job of that so far.
Especially now, man, we're in 7-on-7 territory too. Like that's got to be big, I would think. And looking at some of the other guys, you'd mentioned Kamorian Morgan earlier, and I got to ask, is there a real shot here? I mean, this is a 4 or 5-star guy, Duncanville, full of studs, and he did visit Baylor. So is there a real shot here?
Yeah, Kamorian Morgan. He's actually South Oak Cliff. So
South Oak Cliff, sorry, not Duncanville. Oh God, that's gonna be bad. Yeah. That's gonna be bad. You're right. South Oak Cliff. Sorry. Sorry. That's bad. Golden Bears.
Baylor should have a very fair shot at him. You see A&M come around. He had his official visit there last weekend, and it seems like they made a really good final impression on him. But Baylor exceeded everyone's expectations. I will say that. Personally, mine, when you see a guy like Kamorian Morgan on there who doesn't come around in the spring and, they say they finally got this official visit schedule, you don't really expect that there's going to be any smoke around it. And leaving that visit, it was pretty clear from last Sunday, from the 14th, that, there was legitimate interest between him, his family, and Baylor. There's a connection there. It'll be hard. And this is what I've had to say a lot over the last couple of weeks. It's going to be hard to get over the A&Ms and the Texases and even the Texas Techs.
Yeah.
But it's very possible. And when you package, together everything that they're doing, the new staff and, a renewed focus on NIL and setting guys up with that, it gives Baylor a shot. And I think this may be one that we see go on for a few more weeks. But I think it's one that Baylor's in until the very end.
Passion, drive, patience. All the things we want in a 2025 Baylor football recruit are also the things that keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And they've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. so you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Canada is celebrating no matter who won the hockey game. But unfortunately, that eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to our U.S. customers. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Once again, ebaymotors.com. Okay, so that brings up something like I hadn't really thought about, but we talk about how much a quarterback in the class can recruit. And I'm thinking about a guy like Kamarian Morgan. So let's just say he commits, right? And he goes to Baylor, sticks it through, plays at Baylor. Does that have a ripple effect down the line? Because it's always going to be tough to compete with UT and A&M for some of these top players in Texas. But for a big program like South Oak Cliff or like a Duncanville, just throw that out there too, or a DeSoto, who they've got a commitment from as well, does that start to turn around their fortunes at major programs like that? I know it's small window of, I played with that guy, and you only have about 2 years of that. But have you seen that before, where a ripple effect can come through of like, oh yeah, my guy played at Baylor, he loved it, he came back and went to our games at Duncanville or DeSoto or Aledo or wherever it may be, and now I want to go there. Do you think that's real in high school football?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen it quite a bit, and especially the Texases and the A&Ms. They do a good job of, okay, we're, maybe we don't love this kid, but we want to make sure that we still have those relationships with the Duncanvilles and, the North Shores and the Cadies. And I think Baylor's in a good spot to do that with Duncanville right now. We'll see about DeSoto. In the Houston area, Shadow Creek, they've done a great job.
That's
Ashton
a good one,
Jones, Kyron Jones, was once on the team and has since talked very fondly of his time at Baylor. So you want to make sure that, you're sticking with these, you're not doing wrong out of players from these big name programs. And I think if, South Oak Cliff, that's one where their talent has only gotten better. I mean, exponentially better over the last 5 years or so. And getting a guy like Kamarian Morgan, also who was at Red Oak, and still has a lot of friends there. So that's 2 programs right there where if you can get him and show that not only if you're a good guy at one of those programs, but you're the best, you're a top 100 player, bona fide top 5 player at your position, it would be huge for Baylor. I mean, there's not much more I can say. It would be huge.
Awesome. I just remembered that because I used to see it in hockey growing up in Massachusetts. That's what we look at for recruiting challenges. So I remembered that teams trying to link up with certain programs. But I do want to get your take on just overall. We're obviously expecting commitments this week. You've probably heard some between the time of recording this and listening to this. But where is Baylor at right now? I mean, we were talking about a top 25 class before the Schobel decommitment. It feels like we're either going to hit a deluge or we missed a chance at a deluge of commitments here. Where is Baylor at in this 2025 class?
Like I said, it's going to be a crucial, I would say, 2 weeks for Baylor. July 1st is going to be a really important week for them, where Caleb Burns will commit, and it's looking like Texas Tech, SMU, and Baylor are the group right now. There's a lot of smoke around SMU after his official visit there. There was a lot of smoke around Tech after his official visit there. That's a huge priority for Baylor. And they're going to have a lot of work to do over the next few days to make sure they can get in. A guy like Ja'Cory Watson, he'll commit the day after that on July 2nd, fighting out with Houston and Boston College. But they really like where they're sitting right now. And that's another one. So, Tanook Hines, I could go on. It's there's probably a dozen guys that Baylor toasted over the last 2 or 3 weeks that are scheduled to commit. Harrison Clough, who was just there, offensive lineman out of Mississippi. Matthew Parker, who somehow Baylor got on campus about 2 days after he committed to Vanderbilt. So, the class it has a lot of holes right now. But I think I would say by July 10th, a lot of those will be filled. And if they're not, we'll see a lot of offers being sent out and a lot of guys, kind of renewing their interest in Baylor.
Gotcha. So that kind of leads me into my next question. And I guess this might be dependent on how much they get in the next couple of weeks here, but when does the works really start for 2026? I know they've put out offers for sure, but when do they really start focusing in on that 2026 class? Is it after July 10th, or are they feeling things out and are like, a week before, we don't like where we need to be, let's get on it now?
Yeah, I mean, the work has started. They just kind of, to be honest, fell into it with Davis Penn, who committed a couple weeks ago, who just loved his time on campus and decided, I don't need to wait anymore. And Baylor is only going to take one running back in the class. So that's an opportunity where, you have a chance to say, we like you and we want you to commit now, and you're the only guy we're going to take. And that was a really great way for Baylor to start out in the class. Composite, top 300 guy in the country, probably a guy that will end up receiving offers from the state powerhouses for sure, and probably national powerhouses. And the next step is quarterback. Because we're right around that time where 2026 quarterbacks, especially the elite ones, start to make their decisions. And we're seeing it already. Michigan got one. I believe Florida State got one the other day. So the wheels are definitely turning. And, Keyshawn Henderson ended up going to Houston. There's some interest with Baylor there. There's Grant Smith out of Grand Oaks and Conroe. Roman Seymour, who's another Houston guy. They've offered a lot of 2026 quarterbacks. And it's about that time where they need to focus in on about 2 or 3. And that'll be really exciting to see, because I think they've got a great shot with more than a couple of them.
By the way, in quarterback, sad news on Antoine Hill, that Memphis commitment. That was one you were like, hey, look out. I'm not saying it's coming, but Baylor has some interest. So too bad to see. But anyway, Will Turboff, in a couple of weeks, he's finally going to get some sleep. But Will, tell us about what you've got on the docket. I'm guessing it's a lot of commitments, and how people can find your work.
Yeah, we're really stepping it up over at Bears Illustrated. So make your way on down. We've got some great stories about some of the current commits this week. Some guys who we think are trending towards Baylor's way. So that's 247sports.com and Bears Illustrated, and at Baylor Bears 247 on Twitter, or I guess we're still supposed to call it X. So on X. And myself, right there, at Will Turboff, and
easy enough.
Yeah, and hopefully back on the show with you sometime, with you and Matt soon.
Oh, we will have you on both shows soon, both Locked On Baylor and the Matt Mosley show, because I try to get through to Mosley, but he can't hear anything recruiting wise unless it's coming from you. So I get it. Anyway, if you're going to follow anyone in these next couple of weeks in terms of Baylor football, Will Turboff is the one. Will, thank you so much for coming on again.
Thanks for having me, Cam. It's always a great time.
Special thank you once again to Will Turboff. Always keeps us up to date on that Baylor recruiting news. And as you can probably tell, we audibled this week, Monday, Tuesday, as you're listening, and Wednesday episodes, as we'll do a little preview of Wednesday night's first round of the NBA draft. We'll hear a couple Bears have their name called. So let me know down in the comments what you think about this 2025 recruiting class, what Baylor might need to do differently to give you a positive outlook on the future. And should Baylor still be in competitions with places like Tech? Should they be bigger than that by now? 3-9 record doesn't prove as much, but it's been a lot more successful at Baylor the last decade and a half than a lot of other Texas schools. So let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, because you'll get alerted whenever we are dropping episodes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll see you tomorrow on Locked On Baylor.